Well, my name's Jason Roper. We're at the Rivertown Brewing Company in Monroe, Ohio. This is actually our second location. Our first location was down in Lockland, Ohio. We kind of outgrew it a few years back and built this location in 2016. Completed construction beginning of 2017, and here we are today.
And now you make how many different types of beer here?
I think annually probably around 23 to 28 different styles of beer throughout the year.
And I really like your story because you just decided you wanted to start a brewery, and you did.
Well, I think everyone's inspired to do that. I was kind of thrust into find a job, make your own way, because I worked in a completely different industry that was swallowed up. So it was make or break for me.
Yeah, but now look at this place. I mean, this is so impressive. It's beautiful. And tell me what happens here where we're standing.
So we're on a 50-barrel brew house, which basically means every time we brew 50 barrels in a batch. That's 1,550 gallons per batch. Basically, barley malt comes into this guy here, which is called a grant or a grist case. After it's been crushed in our mill, it is hydrated with water at a certain temperature, depending upon what we're making, and mixes into a mash mixer, which has giant paddles in the base of it.
Let's see if we can see it.
It'll mix in there.
See it, but it's cool. It's like a big propeller.
Yes, basically. It'll mix in there anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, depending upon what we're brewing again. From there, we will actually take it out of the cooker and bring it over to what's called a lauter tun that's behind you.
Okay.
The lauter has giant rakes inside of it that move it.
Okay.
So, at any rate, it goes from that mash mixer, which you can probably get a better shot if you look inside.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that'll help.
Now we can see it.
Now you can see it. So it goes from the mash mixer over to the lauter tun. This is where we're actually going to start the separation process. So we're basically trying to get the sugar water out of the grain. That goes through a process of Orloff, which is in the German term. That's recirculating, basically to leave the grain behind. Then we'll go through a process of sparging. That's basically taking hot liquor or hot water, pumping it over at a certain temperature, and it basically sprinkles on top of the mash. And we will, at the bottom you'll see giant strainers, or a giant strainer.
Oh yeah.
And the malt is held back. The sugar water now comes out the bottom, to where we'll pump that over to the boil kettle, and that's where we'll start adding the hops and going through the boiling process.
Okay, tell us about this piece of equipment.
Okay, so this is basically, it's a separator, centrifuge technology. When we started Rivertown back in 2009, the first beers that we started producing, we didn't filter, separate, or anything, and we found that shelf life stability was just not there. We knew we had to put something in place, so we had very limited budget. We invested in what's called a plate and frame filter technology. It's basically like a giant coffee filter.
Okay.
They're just pressed plates where beer flows through one side. Any particulate matter or yeast or these types of things would be caught up in the microfibers, and you'd be left with, depending upon what type of filter pads you were using, you would either get a very clear beer or you'd end up with a not so clear beer. The problem with that, number one, is that any type of cotton base or microfiber is susceptible to oxygen. So oxidation is definitely a serious issue. The other issue you run into is sanitation. Because you're going into microfibers, you can put in different type of detergents and high temperatures to help combat any type of pathogen or bacteria that might be in there. But you can't be 100% assured, and there's no way to test the inside of a filter. So as we grew and grew and grew, we put in larger size plate and frame filters, and we actually met our original sales rep that started talking to us about Flotvig, and we're talking about the technology. He was great. He's like, hey, you should bring this thing in. Well, at the time, we were so small, our budget was not there. And if you're going to buy a separator, no matter who you buy it from, at the end of the day, you're going to pay for them. They're not free and they're not cheap. But if you can get it to pay you back in terms of efficiency, lowering your overhead costs, in other words, employees having to stand there and filter all day long, change out pads, that kind of stuff, and employee retention, because employees get pissed off having to do that every day. So eventually, he said, let me get a trial run in here, and this was right before we moved into this location, and they had this machine that they were constructing and finishing up, and we had gone back and forth on oxygen pickup, because I'm really big on making sure there's zero oxygen pickup. And they actually designed, and we'll talk about that in a minute, designed a system to be able to deaerate water as it goes in for cleaning and flushing to help bring some of those oxygen parts per million down as we go through the process. Obviously, oxygen's bad for beer, so there are bacteria, which is why I bring that kind of stuff up. And then, of course, speed and functionality was important. We wanted to make sure that we could flow it at a very specific rate, depending upon the type of beer, and get the end results we wanted, the clarity levels we wanted, that it wasn't going to affect the end product in any negative way. And we also needed to make sure that the technology was there and could support the fact that we have employees that multitask. We can't have someone stand in front of a specific piece of machinery all day long. And that's what was great about this, was that the technology was there to where we could actually just kind of set it, let it run through its cycles, and it's really hands off. The way this functions, and we actually marked on the pipe so we know where's beer coming in, where's beer coming out. So centrifuge in. First things first, we charge one of our fermentation vessels with CO2, because we're really big on making sure we're not bringing any oxygen in. The beer passes through this piping here and makes its way into the centrifuge. First thing it's going to do is it's going to read what its clarity level is, so we know what the state of the wort is. If it's very cloudy, it reads everything in EBC, so it's going to tell us a range anywhere from 1, which would be pretty much water, up to 2,000. 2,000 would look like a muddy creek.
So you can automate the settings based on what you're producing? Yes,
correct.
Okay.
And you want to monitor what's going on. So basically, you've got 2 sight gauges here in the front light.
Yeah.
That are gonna tell you what you're looking at. So obviously this is your beer coming in, and there's a light behind it, so you can see just how cloudy it is.
Right.
From there, it's going to make its way over into the centrifuge bowl, which is on the other side there. You can see the process piping, and it kind of basically makes its way in. Inside of there is the actual propeller that's spinning. I call it propeller. I don't know. Is that the proper term? What would be the proper term? The turbine. The what? What'd you call it? Stack. I've heard 3 different people refer to it as different things. Basically, it spins at around 6,700 RPM, which is pretty darn fast. I think that is the speed of some airplanes, as they said.
Really?
Yeah. You know, and as that beer is flowing in and over the top of it, it's basically throwing it against the wall, throwing all the solids and everything to the sides, and you're basically, without getting into too much, but your beer is running down, up, and then it's making its way back up through this pipe here. And what's coming out this side should be separated wort or liquid at this point. So basically any hop debris, yeast, those types of matters are being thrown out the side of that bowl, and it makes its way to what's called a discharge chamber. From here, once that fills up, you'll do the discharge, and it pumps in deaerated water, it pumps in clarified groundwater, basically to make sure there's no mineral buildups inside the valves, and it'll clean that out. We'll get a nice big yeast glob or whatever on the floor. Obviously, we positioned it directly over a drain.
That's smart.
So it makes its way right out. And then from there, if it detects, and the operator can also detect on the other side too, that the EBC is out of spec, if it's too high, too low, whatever, either the system can reroute and allow the, let's say it's hazy, let's say it's really, really dirty. We're going to send it back through until it achieves its end goal. And when the system says, yep, that is the correct EBC, it's going to send it back out this pipe over here. We can actually pull a sample to make sure that it looks the way we want it to inside the glass. And it'll make its way down and out the exit port. These exit ports are connected over to our bright tanks. So basically, we're taking beer from the fermenter, which is unclarified. We're clarifying it, and then we're sending it over to our bright tank.
At what stage in the process is this toward the end? This is toward the end of the process.
So this is preparing for packaging.
Okay.
So we're trying to get the product shelf stable. It's prior to carbon dioxide being added, so it's not carbonated yet. We're about 3 days from getting it into the bottle or the keg at this point. For lack of better words. So a couple of important components here. That's the basic overall. That's how it functions, how it works. There's obviously a lot more to it. Speed of the bowl is important. Flow is important. How much flow we're actually bringing in, and of course being able to deaerate the water. One of the things that we noticed in some of the specs on the base machine was that it fluctuated in the amount of oxygen it picked up. Remember that this is a orbital spear spinning at a very, very fast rate. Anything you pump into it has the potential to pick up oxygen.
Sure.
So we want to try and limit that as much as possible. So we actually pump CO2 gas into this deaerator here, and we'll bring groundwater in, we'll go through a filtration process, double filter, actually inject CO2 into it prior to flushing out the bowl. So everything that touches the inside of that has carbon dioxide versus oxygen inside of it.
How long does this part of the process take?
Depending upon the product, here, come on over here.
Okay.
So, for example, we can set this at different rates and intervals. So for example, the wrong screen here. We've got all different types of setups for our different products.
Okay.
So for example, if we're going to make like our lager, the system, we can set it here, and it will actually detect, based on the EBC, if it sees a rating higher than this, it's actually going to slow down or increase the inlet feed of the gallon per minute rating. So for example, if we're coming in at 500 EBC, which is pretty murky, it's maybe not like a dirty river, but it's pretty murky, it's going to slow the gallon per minute flow rate down to like 6 gallons per minute. And what that's doing is it's giving the bowl more time to basically separate all of the solids inside of the solution, or the liquid. I tried. So at any rate, the reason we chose the separator technology, first and foremost, I think any brewery would want a separator. Any brewery would want a centrifuge, because it cuts your overhead. It really helps with your labor hours. You can get consistent results. But at the end of the day, this technology is terribly expensive. I mean, it's not cheap. It's not free, as I think I said earlier. So one of the big things, big hurdles for us, was when Flopdig came in and said they would work with us. They actually said, we'll give you, I think at first they gave us a 6-month trial. The first 3 months free, and then we'll set up kind of a rental. They allowed us to rent it for the next 3 months after that. I don't even think we got to the rental phase, because we had already seen the first 30 days we had it in place. And I should probably mention this really quickly. We had to figure it out.
Sure.
We definitely did, and we had our trials and tribulation. And first we were like, oh, I remember calling Martin, it's not working, it's not doing it. And he would, hold on, I'll walk you through, blah 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 blah. And
that's great.
Once we got past that and we figured out, and it was, you have your aha moments. It's like, okay, now I get why this does this. But once we had that down, by the 3rd month in, when we were now to the point where we were renting the machine, I think I called Dan and I was like, yeah, we'll take it. And I'm like, we'll get a check cut. And we're ready to go.
And so you've had it for almost a year. It's been functioning since last April.
Yes.
And of 2017.
That's right.
So you've already seen the return on investment.
Yes. Actually, we saw the return on investment in about 6 months.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was pretty fast.
And so it's fully automated. You don't have somebody standing here. It's doing what you need to do in a timely manner, and it stays operational.
It stays operational.
Is it low maintenance?
Very low maintenance.
Okay.
It really requires, big key for us, again, we're just very, very particular about making sure we clean. We clean. Matter of fact, I tell the guys all the time, I'm like, if you just want to forget and let it run on auto clean cycle for 30, 40 minutes because you got other things to do, run on auto clean cycle. You're not going to hurt it by cleaning it.
So it has an automatic clean cycle?
Yes, it's got a full CIP system in place. So basically you can set it and it'll run it through every single valve, every chamber, and we'll run it through a caustic and acid cycle and then rinse every single time.
Do you get any data back from the automation? Does it give you
in terms of, it'll tell you how many turn times it's gone through. I mean, it's not, do remember that, automation is not going to put on a white glove and walk through and go,
Right.
But, it can at least walk you through the process, and if you know that your process is good coming out, it's going to be good coming out. Coming in, excuse me. If it's good coming in, it should be good coming out.
Have you had any problems or issues with it?
No. You know what? The one issue I thought I was having was my fault. So, at the end of the day, I think once we got it all figured out and we were off to the races, I mean, very low maintenance, so there's really not much to it. I think we had one time the relay valve went off, we don't know why, but again, just a simple phone call, and it was like, oh, that should be valve number 29, or the relay switch 29, just flip it on, and you're good to go. Why that happened, I don't know. It's running fine now. It's been fine ever since.
Fantastic.
And just tripped or something stupid. When you make beer, that's what you get. This happens to be a lager. Some could be an ale, it could be a Belgian beer, or whatever. I think that's about 3 weeks in the process of fermentation. Lager is again about 30 days, so we get about another week or so to go. So we'll get a little bit more clarity, but it's pretty close to that. And once we go through the separator, we get everything spinning.
Then it looks like this.
That's what you get.
And
Matter of
that's
fact,
what you want.
I
right?
always look for this. If you can see your fingerprint on the back side,
Wow.
you are clear.
Wow. So that's what beer is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, depends on the beer. if it's a porter or stout, it could be pitch black, but yeah.
Yeah, but still, you should be able to see.
You should be able to get, regardless of what the color of the base beer is, you should still get the same kind of clarity. Just, it could be a different color rating.
Okay.